Hey there, scientists. Today we are talking about the biosphere. This will be our fourth of the Earth's systems and our last of the spheres that we're going to focus on. Your goal today is that you need to be able to describe the biosphere and you need to explain how the biosphere interacts with the other three spheres we've discussed. First thing that you have to remember when we jump into the biosphere topic is that the prefix bio, B-I-O, it means life. So, can you give examples of various life forms that you might find in the biosphere? Exactly. I mean, you can look at this image and you can see that animals would be in the biosphere, plants would be in the biosphere. Don't forget, it's important to remember that fungi and microbes and bacteria, like we studied back in our life science unit, those would also be in the biosphere. So the biosphere is all life, all living things. All right, so what do all of the living things shown in this image have in common? Everything that we see here. Everything that we see here is part of the biosphere. Humans are part of the biosphere. So are the crops they grow and the living organisms in the soil, like the microbes, the bacteria, the fungi. Those are all living things. The elephant is part of the biosphere. The plants, the zebras, every living thing in the savannah is part of the biosphere. All organisms need water from the hydrosphere, and that is one of the ways the hydrosphere and the biosphere interact. Living things have needs that must be met in order for them to survive. And like we just mentioned, that water that is from the hydrosphere that is interacting with the plants and with the animals is one of the things that living things need to survive. It's one of the things they need for their needs to be met. What are other things that plants and animals need other than water from the hydrosphere in order to be able to survive? Well, if we can recall back to what we learned in life science, animals are going to need air. We already established they're going to need water, they're going to need food, they're going to need space. Plants are going to need air, they're going to need sunlight, they're going to need space. Remember, oxygen and carbon dioxide, those would be gases that we find in the atmosphere. Those are things that are going to be needed by living things so they can survive. So already we're starting to see how the biosphere is interacting with the atmosphere, the hydrosphere, and the geosphere, because when these animals need space, they need land to live on, and that is the geosphere. So as we move forward, we're going to get into our reading and we're going to focus on how animals of the biosphere interact with each other and how the biosphere interacts with those other systems that we've been talking about, the atmosphere, the geosphere, and the hydrosphere. The biosphere is made up of all of the organisms living on Earth. It includes all of the plants, animals, fungi, and microbes living. The biosphere also includes human beings. All living things require water and nutrients to live. Organisms that live in streams, lakes, or oceans get water from their surroundings. On land, plants get water and nutrients from the soil. Most land animals get water by drinking. Plants take in carbon dioxide from the atmosphere to make food. The release of oxygen into the atmosphere, they release oxygen into the atmosphere. Animals and plants use oxygen and release carbon dioxide when they break down food to release energy. So we know that from when we've talked about photosynthesis, and we can make those connections between how the biosphere is interacting with the atmosphere, the hydrosphere, and the geosphere. So let's recap here. What makes up the biosphere? The biosphere, says right here in my text, is made up of all of the living organisms on Earth. It includes all of the plants, animals, fungi, and microbes living on Earth. So, what makes up the biosphere? All of the living organisms on Earth. How do humans interact with the other organisms in the biosphere? Well, humans are growing crops. They depend on plants and animals for food. You might already know that plants are used to help control the geosphere. They can be used for erosion or for sunlight and shade in order to make environments more pleasing for landscaping. We have animals from the biosphere that serve as pets to us, or service animals, or work animals. And those are all ways that we have humans directly interacting with the biosphere. How do the plants and the animals of the biosphere depend on each other? Well, again, I can go back to my text. And plants take in carbon dioxide from the atmosphere to make food. They release oxygen into the atmosphere. Animals and plants use oxygen and release carbon dioxide when they break down food to release energy. So the plants and the animals of the biosphere are working together so that they can share carbon dioxide and oxygen with each other. Now, we have identified multiple ways in which the biosphere interacts with the other systems. We have land animals getting water by drinking the water from the hydrosphere. We have organisms that are in the biosphere that live in water, so they're directly connected to the hydrosphere. We know that our plants are absorbing water from the soil, so they're connected with the hydrosphere. We know that there's interactions between the biosphere and the atmosphere when we have these gases given off by plants and animals becoming part of the atmosphere, and then the gases are then taken from the atmosphere by the living things to meet their basic needs. And all of this takes place on the geosphere. So we can easily see how the biosphere is connected and interacting with every other one of the spheres in order for life on Earth to be possible, in order for all of these systems to be able to keep each other balanced and to interact. All living things in the biosphere interact with their surrounding environment, which includes all of the Earth's other three systems. Environments are made up of both living and non-living things. So think about non-living things that you might find in any given environment. And I know this is something that you have talked about previously and you've talked about in depth in 4th grade. Possible things that you might be thinking right now is soil is a non-living thing that is part of an environment. Water, air, sunlight, rocks, minerals, those are all non-living things that you may find in an environment that make life in the environment possible. Think about how a plant and animal might interact with the non-living things for survival. Clearly, you're thinking that plants need sunlight to make food, and sunlight is a non-living thing, but without it, that environment is not sustainable for plants. Or nutrients from the soil. Those are non-living things, but plants and animals need those nutrients in order to be able to survive. So we've spent a lot of time here in the biosphere talking about life and living things, but there's non-living components of the biosphere and of the geosphere and the atmosphere that help to support the biosphere that are non-living. Within the biosphere, plants and animals from different ecological communities connect. Plants and animals that live and grow in these communities are determined by the physical characteristics of their surrounding environment. So here we have these zebras that are living in the savanna, and we know that they're living here because this particular environment is going to match their needs best. You've done some work in the past talking about biomes and talking about ecosystems. So Think about how those biomes, like what makes a biome, what makes a area unique for specific animals to live. And think about how the major plants and animals live there. How are they surviving in that biome, in that element of the biosphere that meets their needs? So what does it eat and what eats it? Those kind of questions are also part of this biosphere discussion. Going forward, you are going to have to identify what makes up the biosphere. You're going to have to make an explanation about how land animals interact with the atmosphere. And you're going to have to explain how the elements of the biosphere and the hydrosphere interact. We know that there's a lot of powerful living things and interesting elements of the biosphere, and especially how these three spheres interact. Be a critical thinker as you work through this, scientists. And remember, your goal is you can describe the biosphere and you can explain how the biosphere interacts with the other systems. Good luck, scientists.